Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we are going to be talking about a synapsid. And because we're talking about a synapsid, we know our limits, and we have asked a friend of ours to come in and tell us about this synapsid, because otherwise this video would have been approximately 45 seconds long.
We brought in the special forces.
We would have just lied for 2
So
hours.
before we can just sit here and we'll be told about Lystrosaurus. And so anyway, before
will
we
you.
introduce ourselves again, yes, you will also learn about Lystrosaurus in this video and perhaps many other things. I can't wait to see where this conversation takes us. But anyway, please introduce yourself to all of our guests.
Hello, my name is Hady George. I'm a PhD student at the University of Bristol, where I'm mainly studying jaw function across the fish-tetrapod transition. But I have studied dicynodonts in my master's, and I'm still working on them at the moment, both from the Permian and the Triassic.
It's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. This is really good. Hady, actually, you recently published a paper on a dicynodont as well. Do you want to? What's the name of that taxon again? It's Gordonia.
Yeah, Gordonia traquari, and it's not too distantly related from Lystrosaurus.
Well, that's perfect. So, well, thank you for joining us for the video. I guess we should probably just introduce ourselves so we can get the ball rolling here.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, and you'll also notice we've actually, we haven't just had a guest. We've replaced members of the crew for this because...
We hate to have you guys learn about this way.
This is a permanent change.
Yes, there have been some staff changes at the Skeleton Crew. So yeah, Amelia wanted to be here today and should have been able to be here today. However, she's recently moved to the desolate wastes of Poughkeepsie, New York. And in these desolate wastes, apparently you cannot get Wi-Fi when you're scheduled to get your Wi-Fi service turned on. And so she's stuck with no telecommunications. It's actually, this is not doing well for my downstate New York bias against anything north of New York City being a barren wasteland.
Yeah, well, that's not a bias.
Right.
It's
just true.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the joke in New York is, of course, upstate starts just north of wherever you live. So, in Poughkeepsie, they're like, we're not in upstate New York. We're in the real New York.
Oh, yeah. It's like how Western Mass is just
west
literally
of
everything west of wherever you are.
It's also
is
everything
antebellum
west of
South.
Boston. Yeah. Hey, Western Mass is really nice.
Yeah, Western Mass is
It's
very
no
pretty.
upstate
It's
New
very
York.
pretty.
Nice.
No, it's not upstate New York.
No, it's
No.
not. It's amazing. Everything around upstate New York is pretty and beautiful, and then upstate New York is just like you're back in the 1600s.
Some of our viewers might be confused, but in parts of the country that are important, the dense population means that there's a lot of interesting regional things happening. You don't get this in any of the states that are shaped like a big rectangle, because there's no feature to map a state line around.
Okay. Anyway,
there's a little Skeleton Crew.
Yes. Now, I am brought to you today by two forces. One, I'm brought to you by the Board of Downstate New York Tourism. Our slogan, don't go to Poughkeepsie. Second, I am brought to you by a new brand of carbonated water today.
Oh, no.
Instead of Topo Chico, I am brought to you by Perrier. I bought in the supermarket because I was interested in it, a Perrier that has electrolytes added to it for flavor.
Does it taste like salt?
It just tastes like dirty carbonated water.
It does.
And my name is Dr. James Napoli. I'm not being paid either by New York Tourism Board, and certainly will never now be paid by Perrier. Ew. But I'm a research instructor at the Renaissance School of Medicine of Stony Brook University in New York, where I teach human anatomy to PA students, physical therapy students, and dental students, starting very shortly as we move into a new course.
Well, I certainly hope that they pay you.
They do, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
And so do you, members of the Skeleton Crew Patreon.
Join our Patreon. It's super fun there. We talk about movies and stuff and have a lot of fun discussions. And someone that you might see there is me, Scott Johnston, the vertebrate paleontology fossil preparator and technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology. I've been a whole lot more active in our Pet Photos Discord because I just got 2 kittens, and you might see them running around in the background here because you could see a little bit of my floor in the corner, and they've been just beelining it back and forth. It's the post-lunch zoomies, but they're adorable.
Very nice.
Have you named them yet?
No, not yet. I'm really leaning towards Jake and Elwood because I'm pretty sure that they are both boys, and I really like having them be the Blues Brothers.
That's charming.
I do like that. But have you considered Topo
No.
and Chico? Do it. Everybody in the comments, pressure him into naming his cats Topo and Chico.
Don't do that. Don't be mean to Scott.
From a bit that they have not.
Says
I'm not aware
Alex.
of.
Yeah, for
Oh,
a bit.
no, it's in the Proceratosaurus video, don't worry.
You'll know.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now that Scott's done his whole thing, and we're all happy for you, Scott. My name's Alex Rubenstahl. I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University, and you won't see me in our Discord because I actually pay a series of fae that I've captured and keep in my basement to post there, and they can't eat unless they disagree with someone every time they log on. They don't live long. They need the sun, and they're usually dead after 3 weeks. So I go through a lot of them. If that's why my opinions don't seem to really have any rhyme or reason to them. They're easy to catch.
Well, that's Alex's bit for today.
Yeah.
I'm Dalton Meyer. I'm also a PhD candidate at Yale University. And while James is sponsored today by Perrier, I am sponsored by Perrier, the choice of canned air of President Scroob of Planet Spaceball, which has an air shortage, but can take canned Perrier from Planet Druidia. No one in our audience is old enough to have seen Spaceball. And that's okay.
Oh
They should
my
watch
God.
it.
They should.
Which
And
is
together.
together.
Where's
Where's
the
the
skeleton crew?
Oh
I
my
was,
goodness.
I was going to say that I did not know about Perrier sparkling water before I watched Spaceballs, and so that
Oh,
joke
really?
went completely over my head when he had the can of Perrier.
No, I didn't either. That was actually how I learned that Perrier existed. I
Incredible.
remember getting very excited when I first saw it at the grocery store a couple of years later. I was like, that's the thing from Spaceballs.
You saw it and you clapped. I know
I
what that
clapped
is.
when I saw it.
A real Star Wars.
All right. Speaking of things that we will clap when we see,
Yes.
hey Dalton, you want to release our adorable little pug critters?
I would love to. Here they come. They're so small.
The way that they just spill out of there is remarkable.
Oh,
I like how they immediately start moving so much more slowly.
yeah.
They have to sprint out of the hatchery
They ran
and then
out.
they're
Oh.
just like,
Well,
And
they
I
look
zoomed
like
out
they've
completely.
been dropped on the surface of the moon when you zoom in really closely.
This is welcome to upstate New York.
Welcome to hell.
Welcome to Poughkeepsie. Welcome to the
man.
Lystrosaurus assemblage of the Karoo Basin. More or less. As much as you can do in a game where you can't ever get rid of trees.
Indeed.
There would be, there would be some trees.
And there are no... Well, you can't put Glossopteris in the game. They only have pine trees.
and very big
shame.
horse ferns, right?
Yeah.
it's very sad. Well, anyway, so Hady, normally we try to open these discussions by saying what the animal's name means, but I actually have no idea what Lystrosaurus means. So, could you tell us, please?
Yeah, Lystrosaurus just means shovel lizard in reference to its very downturned snout. Almost looks like it's shoveling like things out the ground.
Huh.
That makes
Got a
sense.
face like
That's
a
a good
shovel.
name.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
And I think
And do
Lystrosaurus
we
was
ask
named
this
by
be-
Cope as well. The genus.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
In the proud tradition of every fossil.
See, yeah, I was curious of whether Lystrosaurus was named shovel lizard because it was hypothesized that it used its face as a shovel, or because it looks like it was hit with one.
Hey, rude. Be nice.
You would say that to this cute gentleman here?
See-
Look at him.
Okay, I'm gonna very quickly go into a little bit about the design. This is so cute. I love this thing so much. If they made a marketable plushie for this, I would buy it. It's adorable. I loved seeing it in the movie. I love that it's kind of a bastard and beheads an Oviraptor, which also just makes it go up a bunch in my rankings personally. The fact that it is so cute and everything means that it isn't the best looking for a Lystrosaurus, because holy good lord, they are rough looking critters.
Yeah. Well, so I think, Alex, did you ask about what species this might be?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess this is probably a good place to start the discussion. So, Hattie, I'll just ask this question with my little bit of information that I know. Weren't there like hundreds of named species of Lystrosaurus at some point? I remember talking to Christian Kammerer at one point, and he mentioned, I think in a paper, he had to synonymize literally dozens of species together.
Oh my god.
Something like that. It's that bad.
Yeah, I think he's specifically referring to his 2011 paper, which isn't just focused on Lystrosaurus. It's more focused on a different dicynodont called Dicynodon, which has had, I think, over 170 species named in that. It's something ridiculous. He even calls it like a taxonomic wastebasket, not just wastebasket, but dumping ground, just because of how many species there's thrown into that. And Lystrosaurus itself has many dubious species within it. I mean, there seems to be several that are valid, and they are like from all over the world. Several of them pop up in several different places. For example, there are many in common between from localities in South Africa and in Antarctica. But then some places have like their own unique things, like what's going on in Russia, where you have Lystrosaurus georgi, and then you have some stuff in China, which is, I think, still a bit contentious at the moment. Is probably one like valid unique species to the Chinese localities. Although I think there needs to be more study to really figure out how many species are there in China, and are they the same as those in other places. So it looks like maybe at the moment we can say there's like around 5 or 6 Lystrosaurus species.
Okay, so interesting.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, Lystrosaurus wasn't the dumping ground, right? That was Dicynodon?
Yeah. But some species of that are now in Lystrosaurus were in Dicynodon. For example, Dicynodon curvatus or Dicynodon murrayi, which were named before the genus Lystrosaurus was coined, but were then later put into that genus Lystrosaurus and removed from Dicynodon.
Interesting. Okay. So, dare I ask, what species is this?
It's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure, because it all comes down to like some features in the skull that we might not be able to see from like the outside or the skin and flesh on. But if I had to guess, I mean, it looks like where like the roof of the head meets the downturn snout, there isn't like a very abrupt like change in plane. It's quite like a continuous downward curvature, and I think that might be characteristic of Lystrosaurus curvatus specifically. So I think it could be that one. However, I mean, it's I can't say for sure if there's like not a skull in the game that I can look at.
It's a good point. And I guess something that could be a confounding variable on this is that we checked a little bit earlier, and turns out that in the game you can dig for and make this Lystrosaurus in both the Karoo Basin and in China. So it's both in South Africa and China. Is curvatus known from both? I guess you said that the Chinese stuff is contentious.
Yeah, so curvatus is definitely from South Africa. There are 4 species from South Africa: murrayi, curvatus, declivis, and mckagy. I mean, some of them are Permian and Triassic, others are Triassic only. And then in China, we have Hedini, Lystrosaurus hedini, and there might also be Lystrosaurus youngi. However, I think, as I said before, like it's unclear exactly if these are valid. I mean, it looks like Hedini might be valid, but youngi might just be another Hedini, or maybe they are both something else entirely. So, although I think at the moment we would consider Hedini likely to be valid. And then we don't have curvatus in China, but for the moment at least. And they all kind of do look quite similar. So once you put all the flesh on them, all the skin and all the muscles and everything, I'm not sure if you could really be able to tell them apart that clearly. Although it depends on their life appearance looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Do you know offhand how old are the Lystrosaurus from China? Are they also Permian and Triassic, or are they just one or the other?
I believe they're traditionally thought to be Triassic, although I think there might be some uncertainty, and it's possible some specimens from China are actually from the Permian. Most Lystrosaurus species we know of, in general, from all over the world, are mainly Triassic. The 2 we can definitely say were in the Permian were, I believe, curvatus and murray. But the Chinese stuff might be, I'm sorry, some of it might be Permian, but I think it's more likely it's all, if not most of it, is Triassic.
Okay, cool.
Interesting. Huh. And so, do we have an age stated for this guy in this game? Is it supposed to be a Triassic or a Permian
Let
animal?
me see. Let me check the database. Let's see.
He's checking the database, folks.
God, that really just tastes like dirty water. Whose idea was it to make unflavored seltzer with electrolytes in it?
That's so funny.
I do feel good though, because I
feel great.
I mean, like I've got electrolytes pumping. My neuromuscular junctions and synapses are full of salt ions.
Are you sure your body's just not going, oh, water?
Water.
Water. I need water. Help me. every cell in my body.
Your shriveled cell.
So it seems to be Permian.
It says late Permian, yeah, for Lystrosaurus. The text in the description
Cowards.
mentions that it crosses the Triassic, but it highlights late Permian in particular. It also has an interesting note that I think is probably wrong, which is saying that the name meaning shovel lizard is in reference to its powerful forelimbs.
No, okay, that might actually...
Which I would assume...
Yeah. So I might have been incorrect about it then. It must have been that. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm curious now. I don't want to...
I'm not... You know what? I'll look into this because I am not super inclined to trust the veracity of the the Jurassic World Evolution 2
Considering
database.
it has a shovel-shaped head.
Considering it has a shovel-shaped head and shovel-shaped tusks, and there was another bit in, I think, another one of the different ones that said, like, it referred to, like Velociraptor hunting Dinocyrus or something like that. There was some incredibly stupid things in there.
I would love to see it try.
Yeah, right. No, I think it was even stupider than that. I don't know. People in the comments talk about your favorite really stupid thing in there. We can move on while I'm looking for this. By the way, please.
Oh my god, they run.
They do. They kind of trundle along. So in talking about that it's a little tough to tell exactly what species this is underneath all of that skin and tegument and everything. Why don't we talk a little bit about the life appearance of this guy in game? Namely, they kind of made him a ceratopsian a little bit. He's got a little bit of a frill.
Does he really?
He does a little bit. If you look, like Dalton, if you look behind, like it has a frill.
Huh.
So that's wrong, right?
I think it is wrong, yeah, because that's where I guess the neck muscles are coming onto meeting the back of the head.
Is that the shovel?
We found the shovel. So it's good to know that that's wrong. Pretty much every depiction of Lystrosaurus I've seen has not had like Microceratus style little like frill thing there. So it seems that the designers of the game forgot that this is not a ceratopsian. But another area that I'm kind of curious about as to the life appearance of this guy is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the puppet that they had in the movie had hair.
It did? I don't even remember that. Yeah.
At least to some degree.
Well,
I remember
eyebrows.
there was yes, okay, yeah. These guys do have eyebrows.
Yeah, they look like Yoda, kind of. They've got like Yoda hair.
Oh yeah, they do. Because I remember when the still from Dominion came out when they were filming during the pandemic, and they had the puppet of the Lystrosaurus in a cage with a like COVID mask on. Right. People were talking about, oh my God, it has hair. Wait, what is this a Lystrosaurus? Because it was covering up most of the face. So it was like the debate was, is this Microceratus or is this Lystrosaurus? And definitely turned out to be Lystrosaurus. So, what's your take on that, Hady? Would these guys have been hairy or not?
I think at the moment, the evidence generally leads is against this. So to give a bit more context,
Oh,
I think one thing we can quite clearly see in the fossil record is where the emergence of whiskers is, which is in a lot more derived animals than, or at least closer to mammals, than dicynodonts, such as Lystrosaurus. And we see like towards, as the cynodonts, which is like another group of these stem mammals, which actually includes true mammals, as they become more and more mammalian, they have like this canal in their maxilla that becomes more and more reduced to as they become more mammalian, and eventually it just becomes a foramen which we call the infraorbital foramen. And it's from this foramen you get all these nerves coming out of it. And before this foramen had come to be, when it was just a big canal, those nerves couldn't like branch out to reach many places in the face, which we think is associated with the lack of whiskers in animals such as dicynodonts and many early cynodonts. Now, when it comes to like other features of hair, to add a bit more, if there are whiskers, whiskers are derived hair. So in the case where we do see the infraorbital foramen and the very close relatives of mammals, at that point it is very, very likely that true hair, and specifically whiskers, have evolved. But when we go further back in the fossil record, to the dicynodonts, specifically Lystrosaurus, we see that they might not have the correct like inner ear anatomy that's we now know is correlated with the presence of various endothermic features or warm-blooded features, such as hair. So I think at the moment we can't say anything really, really for sure, but it's unlikely to be the case. And we also now have some Lystrosaurus, or at least one Lystrosaurus, preserved with skin, and the skin looks hairless. It just looks it looks scaleless as well. It's yet to be formally like described in great depth, but what seems to be the case is these animals are very hairless and scaleless, and they're covered with just skin in general.
What I thought when you said that is there's this video that I come across every once in a while of this guy petting a hairless chihuahua. And
oh yeah,
and he's very upset by the experience, and they refer to the chihuahua affectionately as a meat spud.
Dude, he looks like a baked potato.
We call him the Meat Spud.
Dude, oh my god.
That's awful.
That is the vibe I am getting from this.
That's horrible.
It's
the meat spud.
I'll have to when we're done. I'll find the video and send it to you because it is so funny.
Ridiculous.
Man. So all right. So well, I guess this guy probably didn't have his little Yoda eyebrows then. That's a shame.
That's too bad. I like them.
It's not impossible, but at the moment,
fair.
It's probably very
and
unlikely.
they do specifically have it with some sort of like scales on it. Like it's very visibly scaled.
Mostly,
At least on the head it is.
Yeah, it's got like weird like scales on the back of its head and the weird fake frill. But the rest of the body I could read is just kind of nude.
Yeah. You could read it as that, Dalton.
It doesn't look scaly. I don't know. Whatever.
It's fine. Never mind. Moving past this.
One thing I have discovered, I've made a discovery.
Yes.
Is I was trying to find the Cope publication naming
Me
Lystrosaurus,
too.
and it looks like it was one of the kinds of things where it was presented at like an oral, like reading of a paper or like an oral presentation, and then was written down in someone recording it. So it's not entirely clear. There's no explicit note to the etymology, but it is noted that he is describing a skull, and I think he only had the skull. So one would then make the conclusion that it's named for its head and not for the limbs, which Cope presumably didn't know about.
Hey, maybe it's called shovel lizard because he found it with a shovel.
Are you telling us our guest who knows and works on these things was right?
I believe
and the video
so.
game was wrong?
Yes.
Golly. You know, I was reading through some old literature for something I'm doing now, and I was just thinking about all these things that were done in like tiny journals or like presentations that 8 people saw. I'm like, oh, you know, so-and-so thought this about this, but so-and-so thought that. And now I'm just thinking, it's like, what are the odds that these people had no idea what this other hypothesis was, and this is why they thought that? Like, it just hadn't gotten to them.
Very true. Yeah,
But
very
if you
possible.
didn't have access to the right book, it's not like maybe these weren't like firmly held positions when they reproduced them in their work. It's just like, oh, Lamau, I didn't hear about that.
This is the first
I
I'm hearing
think
it.
that probably happened a lot.
There was no Tom Holtz to post the links.
Yeah.
Right.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, Tom can't retire.
No. We're gonna have to. That's gonna be the first use of widely agreed upon use of AI in paleontology. We're gonna make a Tom bot when he retires, and it's just gonna.
Yeah.
Post
We'll
papers.
have to keep his consciousness alive in perpetuity in a
sort of-
machine just to post papers on Twitter so
Yeah,
we can all see them.
I don't know,
We'll
but I must post.
Warhammer 40k him, and
Put his brain in a salt bath with a car battery in it that you turn on every so often.
from the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me.
All right, we should talk about the animal.
Hattie, you were going
we
to say
should.
something there.
I was just going to say, I remember the paper by Cope from 1870 is quite a detailed anatomical study. It's an amazing description of the skull,
cool.
and there's even some serial sectioning, so you see the internal anatomy of the skull as well. So even parts of the neurocranium. It's a really, really great traditional study on the animal. I don't know if it was recorded from an oral presentation, but it was still a source I was using in my master.
Oh, well, maybe I just couldn't find that and I found something else.
I will try
So,
to find the
oops.
link for it, but as I don't have it on my current computer, but it is on my other one. So maybe in the coming few days, I could probably send a link.
Oh, yeah. And we could
That'd be
put a
great,
little
yeah.
on-screen thing.
Hey, viewers, we're talking about something that's not a reptile today. What? Oh my god. Yes. So Lystrosaurus is a synapsid. It is a ancient relative of all living mammals, including us. Of all the animals you can make in the game, it is the closest relative to humans. And the goats don't count.
I
You
was
don't make
about to
those.
say, damn
I
it.
think you ship those in. But I guess also...
We can breed dinosaurs, but not goats, something that people can just do on their land.
Too expensive. Don't have enough room. Anyway, so within synapsids, there are these very early kind of, and I'm going to use enormous air quotes, reptile looking guys. And we talked about Dimetrodon, but as you move up, we get into a group called therapsids. And these are characterized by a number of features, one of which is a more erect gait, which you can... Actually, is that really in Lystrosaurus? I mean,
Yeah,
compared to
back
a
feet.
Pelycosaur, yeah. Okay,
They're kind of doing the wheelbarrow thing with
Keep
this
up more.
guy. That the front legs are a little out and the back legs are more straight.
Yeah, so this therapsids include a number of groups. I think the earliest diverging are the Armasuchids, right?
Yeah. Barmasuchians,
And
yeah.
then- Yes. And then are Gorgonopsids more or less derived than Dicynodonts?
We currently think they are closer to mammals than Dicynodonts.
Okay.
But it's just the next
Okay,
step.
cool. So in between Gorgonopsids and Cynodonts, and Cynodonts including us, and those earlier Biarmasuchids, there are Anomodonts, which are a cool group of at least initially small-bodied, probably insectivores, I think the early ones are said to be. And then they become cool herbivores, like Lystrosaurus. I won't speak too long on these, but I think it's two things I know about the group that are pretty cool are the early ones that still have teeth, because we do have early members of the group that are toothed and long. They have long tails. There were a few species that might be arboreal and represent like the first arboreal
Yeah.
amniotes. I don't know about that, but at least the first arboreal synapsids. And that often when I think of this group, I think of the really big ones like Placerius and the monster one from South Africa. I think it was.
Isn't there a
The
gigantic one from Poland?
Maybe that's what. Okay, yeah, that one. But yeah, what I kind of didn't realize, because I often think of these as a Paleozoic or a Permian group, but the really, really big ones don't show up until the Triassic. It's cool to think that they had kind of a second wind after the Great Dying.
There's some
And I'll
really
leave
fun,
it there.
tiny, small ones too.
And they're in burrows or something? I don't know. I leave it there to our guest, Hady.
I remember seeing a Rastodon skull down in Brazil that's like this big, and it's just it's the cutest, tiniest little man.
Yeah, it's such a small, cute animal. And in the paper describing its brain structure and stuff like that, there's an amazing illustration in its life appearance.
It's so great.
Yeah. But yeah, I think one thing a lot of people don't tend to think about with Dicynodonts is just how long-lived they were as a lineage. So we tend to think of all these early synapsids and therapsids as popping up sometime in the very end of the Carboniferous and, of course, in the Permian, and then dying off basically as the Triassic has begun, or maybe slightly into the Triassic, with the exception, of course, cynodonts, from which true mammals arise. But dicynodonts they're not like this. Instead, they're around for like 60 million years. That's almost as long as the whole Cenozoic, since the dinosaurs have died out till now.
Jesus.
Because the oldest dicynodont is about 260-ish million years old, and the youngest one in fossil record, which is that giant one from Poland, Lysovizia, the size of an elephant, is about 200 million years old. So they have like the 60 million years of being diversifying, and they're really diverse in their anatomy and their ecology in many ways. So, for example, you mentioned in the Triassic they get quite big, but there even are some quite big ones in the Permian as well, like Brachiocephalus, for example. They're not as diverse as the big Triassic ones, as in there are not as many big ones in the Permian. But then you also have small, like hyper-specialized burrowers, kind of like a mole rat, like Coingosaurus. And then you have, of course, the big browsers that are found all over the world in the Triassic. These are like the Canamairi forms. The Sirius is one, but we have them literally from every continent, maybe except Australia. But at the time, that would have been part of Antarctica.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Right.
And to think, and Lystrosaurus specifically, it sits like somewhere in the middle of the big dicynodont phylogeny. So it's not one of the very like small early branching ones. It's not one of those like hyper specialized burrowers. But even though we do actually have fossils of Lystrosaurus found in burrows, but it's also not one of like the big Triassic radiation. And it's somewhere like kind of in the middle, not too distantly related from the namesake of the whole group, which is Dicynodont.
Huh. And what is Dicynodon? I'm just realizing. What does cyno mean in this case?
Dog. As in like
Dog. Okay, so it's two dog tooth.
Yeah. So that's
right. Okay,
one more
makes
thing
sense.
I should add is Alex mentioned that one of like the features of therapsids is like this more erect gait, but another like big feature of them is that they start to differentiate their teeth quite a bit, at least in comparison to their pelycosaur predecessors, those like early non-therapsid synapsids. And in the case of dicynodonts, many of them lost all of their teeth besides their like canine forms, which are equivalent to the canines. And in many cases, such as in Lystrosaurus, these teeth became like big and like proper tusks. Like there's no enamel covering them from the outside in Lystrosaurus specifically.
Oh, really?
But it's all just ever-growing dentium. That's one of the features of many dicynodonts. Not many of the early ones that have lots of teeth, but this is the case in Lystrosaurus and, of course, the Triassic ones. And another cool feature of dicynodonts I should also add is, well, it's reference to like the hole in the back of the head. So, of course, in reptiles, you have like the two holes, right? And then in the synapsids, you have just one hole, the temporal fenestra. This is like the big difference between synapsida and sauropsida, or reptilia. And in the case of dicynodonts, that hole became very big relative to the rest of the head, and it anchored these really strong biting muscles, these jaw-closing muscles, that allowed dicynodonts to have quite a strong bite. In the case of very small dicynodonts, this was good for like crushing up small insects, but in many of the dicynodonts that later evolved, it was for eating like tough vegetation, like the roots of plants, like tubers and things like that.
Very cool.
That is really cool. That's wild just to think about how long they were around. And also that they lasted so far into the Triassic. It's like if just like a Protoceratops kind of group of ceratopsians was alive now. And he was like, oh yeah, here's this thing. Right. And here's a whole group of them. And they're just here.
They're just hanging around.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'm going to dip.
Okay.
I have enough time to get my gear.
How would you rank this man?
Oh, high A. Delightful.
Okay.
All right. Very nice to talk to you, if only briefly, Hady.
Yes, you too, Alex.
All right. Peace, brothers.
All right, see you.
Peace.
I want to say I've seen them do it a couple times here. They seem to. I really like that they have an animation of using those tusks to dig in the game.
Mm-hmm. They find some there. I think they do it when they eat.
Sometimes it might just be an idle animation too.
Oh, okay.
Dicynodonts have this very weird, like feeding system where they have both a beak and they have the tusks, which is unlike anything we have like nowadays. We have things with tusks and we have things with beaks, like turtles or birds, but there is no turtle or bird with like these big tusks as well, or at least any big teeth in general to bite down and like to get things out the ground. And the function of the tusk in Dicynodonts, it's for many of them we can very confidently say they were used in feeding, especially in some of the big Triassic species, where they have what we call like hypertrophied tusks. So they are really, really big, almost like a walrus. Not as long, but the same kind of like width. And we see like these, what are they called? Wear on the teeth from like feeding. But we also know of many different Dicynodonts that have lost their tusks, and like several times throughout the whole evolutionary history of Dicynodonts, different lineages have completely abandoned the whole tusk thing and gone solely for the beak. So there might have been more than just a feeding function to them as well. And there's even one species called Dicynodon, one of the very early branching Dicynodonts. It's featured in the Walking with Monsters with the Gorgonopsid. And in Dicynodon,
right.
And in Dicynodon, it looks like there's some sort of sexual dimorphism where at least one sex doesn't have the tusks and the other one does, which is quite cool.
Oh, wow.
Hasn't it also been proposed that the size is dimorphic within Placerius? Am I making that up?
I think with Placerius, the issue is, like, what we know of Placerius is a bunch of, like, fragments. Like, it's a lot of material, but it's a lot of fragments. And
Okay.
and then the problem from there is, I mean, it's totally plausible. And also Placerius doesn't, I mean, if it does have the, like, big tusks, which I think from what we currently know, is that the tusks aren't very large in Placerius, at least in comparison to others like Dicynodontosaurus, for example, which has these really big overgrown tusks.
Dicynodontosaurus has huge ones. They're crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's not impossible in Placerius, but I think at the moment we don't really have enough evidence to very confidently say that. Although there was a recent paper on this subject. I just cannot remember exactly what it was arguing.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing something recently, and I think they were able to show, like, among the isolated like maxillae, that they were able to show there was like a bimodal distribution of tusk length.
Okay.
And I remember some other trait as well, and I don't remember what it was offhand. So it seems plausible to me, but I can see your concern about, like, if you don't have the rest of the skeleton, like, it's hard to show this bimodal distribution would actually be corresponding to, like, populational differences, right? If you've just got a lot of fragments. But it is interesting. I mean, it seems plausible enough to me.
Yeah.
Oh, so
although I'd like to read the paper.
I found the paper. It's from actually very recently, May of this year, the end of May 2024. And just looking at the abstract, it looks like they found statistical support for bimodal distribution of length of the caniniform teeth, so the tusks, and then also potentially bimodal distribution of the morphology of the quadrate.
Okay.
Oh, okay, right.
So, and they mentioned that, this could be sexual dimorphism. It could be alternatively maybe the presence of juveniles in the sample, or like a time averaged change in either the species, like either the species changed from lower chinley to upper chinley, or it was maybe multiple species, but hard to say for sure. But could very well be sexually dimorphic.
Yeah.
I mean, sexual dimorphism has been proposed for many Dicynodonts as well, so it seems to be like it's something people have been definitely searching for many years now. And it's totally plausible it is the case in many species.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It kind of... I've always felt a little like... I don't know. I don't like the way that we kind of in dinosaurs seem to assume a priori it's not there. Like... It is hard to show statistically. I think, there's a couple of papers that have gone into the issues of doing so. I understand that it's a hard thing to prove, but I think, this is for the viewers, not to overly explain this to the fellow scientists in the chat here. But, like, I think scientists often have difficulty with the difference between I can't prove something or I can't test this, and we know that's not true. Like, and it's a hard thing, right? Like, I don't the example that's often given, it was I think it was Bertrand Russell who came up with the idea of like the teapot in the asteroid belt, which essentially you can't prove there's no teapot in the asteroid belt. Right? Like, how would you prove it? Right? What are you going to go do? Like, are you going to go look for it? Like, right? Exactly. So, and I think scientists do sometimes conflate the like, I can't test this is often used as a synonym for it's not true. Because in that kind of like very facetious example, like we know there's not a teapot in the asteroid belt, even though we can't test it. I know. Well, like assuredly no. But I think there is something to be said for the fact that there are going to be many things you can't test for that you should assume are forces that are operating, or at the very least, your inability to test for them can't be used as evidence that they are not present. Right? Like, to test for something, you need a negative, not a negative. You need to find no effect. And if you know your statistics can't find the effect, you shouldn't do the test if you're looking for that. So with dinosaurs, like, and it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the fossil record of dicynodonts in general is very, very profuse. There seem to be many of these, and it seems to my mind that many, or to my eye, I guess I should say, many of these dicynodont species are known from fairly large samples.
Yeah, I think, like, because I was gonna like mention that like we're testing for dimorphism. It all comes down to sample size, and especially when looking only at skeletons. And in the case of dicynodonts, there are several different taxa for which we have so many specimens. Like Lystrosaurus, as a genus as a whole, it's hundreds of specimens. And then you have others as well, like Dicynodon, which is the one we think there is some sort of sexual dimorphism going on in the presence and absence of tusks. There again, we have hundreds of specimens. And there are even some in the Triassic, like in Dicynodontosaurus, where it's unclear if everything that's been called Dicynodontosaurus, both informally, like unpublished specimens, and also the published stuff, is truly the same species or genus or whatever. But we have a lot of specimens that we could test that in. And then for most Dicynodonts, though, it is actually a bit more patchy and more like the rest of the fossil record. So a lot of Dicynodont species are known from just a few specimens, for example.
Okay. So it's that you've got a few like kind of exemplars that you have a tremendous amount of data for, and then, but it's not that the group as a whole is so ridiculously oversampled.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
That makes me feel slightly better.
Yeah, because I wish like we could test like for these questions about dimorphism and even like ontogeny and other things in so many different species of Dicynodonts. But we are limited to like mainly working on the ones we have great sample size.
Right. No, of course. Yeah. And I mean, it's just something that I think people don't, like many paleontologists know this, but it is not really well understood by the general public how poor the dinosaur fossil record is in comparison to a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like dinosaurs are abundantly sampled compared to many other things. It's certainly better than Mesozoic snakes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, where effectively like there's not a lot of those, right, Dalton?
No.
Or, I mean, I imagine there's actually not an incredible, well, actually, no. Is it that there's like not even a lot of remains in general, or is it just that you can't do a lot with what you've got because it's mostly vertebrae?
It's a bit of both. It's that there are not a lot of remains until you get to like the end Cretaceous, where like then you actually start to get some microfossil assemblages that have lots of snake remains, and then the issue becomes it's mostly isolated vertebrae, and how do you draw like a great number of conclusions off of that? Like it's hard to even assess how many species there are in a given sample because this vertebrae could just be from a different part of the same snake because they're so long. So it's for snakes are. I don't work on snakes for a reason.
Right. And like, so if dinosaurs have a good record compared to that, but dinosaurs don't have a great record, I think, compared to a lot of Dicynodonts. Although it might be more comparable in the sense that there are a couple of these really abundant dinosaurs, but even so, a really abundant dinosaur is one with like 10 to 20 specimens, usually. I mean, there's like Psittacosaurus, there are hundreds to thousands. I think probably over 1,000 specimens, maybe multiple thousands. And then Coelophysis. Yeah, Coelophysis, but with like one really good deposit. Mm-hmm. Like you've got essentially one really good death assemblage with a lot of them.
Like Falcarius.
Right, Falcarius, yeah, again.
There's a Protoceratops.
Allosaurus. Protoceratops, not as much as you might think, but there are a lot. So, like, maybe about 50. Although I haven't been to the collections in Ulaanbaatar, I imagine that there could be over 100. I wouldn't be incredibly surprised. It's certainly the most common thing that comes out of the late Cretaceous Gobi deposits, but it's not like it's not anything like Psittacosaurus, where there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Yeah, right. The hills in China, actually, they're all entirely just Psittacosaurus skeletons, all compressed onto each other and twisted.
That's what the Matrix is made out of.
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, and like T-Rex, everybody calls T-Rex really well sampled. T-Rex, there's like 40 to 50 specimens accessible for research. There's a bunch in private hands, but like even that combined probably doesn't take it to 100. Maybe 100 is the conservative estimate of like number of individuals that have been found regardless of skeletal quality.
Yeah, like a toe.
And so a lot of right. So some of those are a toe and some of those are, a whole T-Rex. Right. Right. Well, one of them is Sue.
Some of them are Sue.
Right.
We are Sue.
So it is kind of amazing to see that you can even do this sort of study with a few different dicynodonts, because in dinosaurs you might get like a single species where you can start to do dimorphism.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add the problem with having such a big sample size then is you start to get issues of taxonomy. So the case where you have just a few specimens, maybe up to 10, 12, 20 of a single taxon, it's much easier to figure out if they all truly are like of the same species, or at least definitely of the same genus, than in the case where you have hundreds. Like, for example, in I was going to bring up the example of Dicynodontosaurus, where we have so many, but many of them are unpublished, and it's at the moment I think unclear if they are all truly like of the Brazilian species, for example, or of the genus more widely.
Huh.
Yeah, it's just I think I don't know if we should include that in the video in general. It's a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
No, please go on a tangent if you want
Tangent.
to. Do it.
I was also going to mention
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Even though dicynodonts are like super abundant, so basically, if you have a terrestrial vertebrate fossil-bearing assemblage from the middle of the Permian to like at least the middle of like the latest Triassic, you are going to find dicynodonts. So even though they are super, super abundant, there are some big gaps in the fossil record. So, for example, in the Triassic, we have this big radiation of these Canameriformes, which includes, Placerius, Deinodontosaurus, and includes many other really cool animals, such as Lysovizia, the giant one from Poland. We don't actually have any definite members of this big radiation in the early Triassic, where we presume they were alive and they were there. And it's not even incorrect to say that they might have even popped up in the end of the Permian. Yet we have no single specimen, which we could definitely say belongs to this giant and super diverse group that was literally all over the world. So we even have these big questions that I think just come down to basically taphonomic factors. Perhaps in the early Jurassic they were in places where they just didn't fossilize, but we don't really know. So that is a big mystery of dicynodont evolution.
Right. I mean, it's not unlike the mysteries of early dinosaur evolution and early archosaur evolution, where we don't find them for a lot of the time where we know they should have been around. It seems to be kind of a perpetual issue with a lot of these clades, and I guess it's probably something to do with the fact that if they're originating at that point, they have to at some point have a low diversity, because the clade has to start with presumably a single species, right? But I wouldn't be surprised also if maybe there's a general taphonomic driver of maybe diversification is driven in complex environments that don't tend to be depositional basins, and then you essentially get never mind, I'm not going to make this simile, but right, so maybe you essentially get they kind of come they originate in mountainous regions or valleys or islands or something, areas that don't tend to deposit sediment, and then they'll flood out and wind up in the floodplains when the clade's already kind of fixed. I have no idea. But I wouldn't be surprised if complex environments that don't lend themselves well to fossil preservation also tend to really support diversification.
Yep.
Just because you're increasing barriers and ecological complexity and all of that.
Well, I mean, like look at some of the most diverse ecosystems in today's world. Like rainforests are incredibly, insanely diverse, and nothing fossilizes there.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually, I mean, why can I not access this paper? I want to make sure, I don't want to say anything that isn't published because I saw it in the talk.
Is this the Luke Weaver
This is
paper?
the Luke Weaver paper, yeah. That this mountain building coincides with what's often kind of called the mid-Cretaceous, or the Cretaceous terrestrial revolution, where you get this overturn in faunal types from the middle to the late Cretaceous. And that there might be association with that kind of faunal overturn with increased episodes of mountain building, which is driving a patchier habitat that can lead to more speciation, essentially.
Right.
There isn't. It's even been argued that in the South African Lystrosaurus species, that they would have migrated to Antarctica, like from time to time, and also going to Antarctica helped them evade like the massive climate crisis at the end of the Permian.
Oh wow!
That was one of the factors, at least. Yeah. So that it's also very likely linked to their ability to burrow, to eat very hard vegetation, and possibly also other things as well that we don't even know about. So that might be all part of like a collection of reasons why they were able to survive this horrible mass extinction.
Which I think is a wonderful segue into the horrible mass extinction.
Right. Something very bad happened at the end of the Permian.
Something happened here.
Yeah. It probably, I would say the KPG impact was probably the worst day to be a vertebrate alive on Earth, just as a single day kind of event.
Yeah.
That would have, I would have had to, change my weekend plans. For instance, so I would have said, I know we were going to go see a movie today, but the entire biosphere is on fire. And so I've actually rescheduled my time here, and I have to be incinerated immediately.
Oh boy, howdy, when you look at the time.
It's incinerated immediately o'clock. But yeah, so I must say I haven't done a great job of keeping up with the literature on what is theorized to have caused the end Permian mass extinction beyond like the broad strokes right now. My understanding is that it seems to be linked to the Siberian trap volcanism, and that it also seems to be a kind of a product of a sustained period of time where the biosphere is in like basically perpetual crisis because of the gas emissions from the volcanic eruptions and cascading effects to the biosphere. So it's not like an immediate kind of event, but like perhaps a couple million years of sustained crisis that leads to almost everything dying. Is that like still considered accurate, or is there more recent scholarship on that?
Yeah, I think that covers the basics of it, that you have a lot. So in Siberia, about maybe was it like a quarter of Siberia or so was basically just exploding volcano, just spewing out all this magma and all this ash and whatever, and killing the atmosphere. And it did go on for a very long time, and it was, I think, like not like a wholly continuous event. We think of the end Permian mass extinction, but what rather was like periods of just spewing out this horrible stuff from just lava and magma coming out. And it did go on for a very long time. I'm not sure exactly how long. Unlikely to be more than 1 million years, I think, for the whole thing. But yeah, it did like put the whole like world's atmosphere and climates, whatever, into like a disaster that just took a very, very long time to completely occur, and then for life to then recover from as well. Took millions of years to recover from that. And we see that in the case of like early Triassic assemblage zones, of vertebrate assemblage zones. I mean, some of which are like 95% dominated by Lystrosaurus, and that, of course, is linked to the fact that Lystrosaurus may have preserved better than other animals because it was burrowing, because it had bigger, thicker bones. But this is also likely linked to the fact that other things just died out. It was really, really horrible, and a few things were able to survive, including Lystrosaurus.
There was. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
There was a book I read a while ago. It was actually while I was on a dig. It was when I was out doing field work in Wyoming with John Flynn and Jack Singh when I was at the AMNH. I got an audiobook version of The Ends of the World, Volcanic Apocalypses, Lethal Oceans, and Our Quest to Understand Earth's Past Mass Extinctions by Peter Brannon. It's a really good book. I'd highly recommend it. And they're like, I've obviously known about the end Permian mass extinction for a very long time and knew that it was bad. Like 90 some odd percent of all life on Earth is numbers that gets thrown around a lot. I know it's different on land versus in the water, but like,
you think that's bad?
well, it was like, so that is one thing to just give a number to it, just like a statistic. But there was a specific passage in the book about the end Permian that just like finally summarized the level and put in like contextualized the level of horror that was happening at that time. That it's during the end Permian mass extinction, the period that we sometimes, I think very justifiably just refer to as the Great Dying, there is a global turnover from meandering river ecosystem deposits to braided river streams. And for those of you who haven't taken like sedimentology and stuff, a lot of the way that, or if you've seen some big winding rivers in real life, a lot of those like meanders and little oxbow lakes that get made when the meanders get a little bit too big and then it gets eroded out and cut off and all that sort of stuff. Those are mostly caused by the root systems of the plants holding the soil together and really strengthening things. And so it gives this very characteristic structure to it. Braided river systems, like what Dalton has created for us here, are kind of just what happens if you take like a pile of gravel or like if you take like a gravel driveway and dump a bucket of water onto it and watch how the things just kind of go wherever they please. So the way that it was phrased in the book is, so many things died during the Great Dying that the rivers ran straight. And that has stuck with me this whole time of just like, I remember I was listening to that in the field, like doing some prospecting by myself because we were in a small crew. And I remember it got to that bit and I just kind of stood up and just kind of stared across the vast nothing of Wyoming for like a good solid 5 minutes in silence. I just paused the book and was just like, huh. Jeez. But like it was a nightmare. Like all of the ash and stuff from the eruption like increased ocean pH by like 30% or something. Like
I think it would have decreased ocean pH, right? It would have increased acidity.
Oh, sorry, increased acidity, decreased pH. Yes, you're correct. Like massively acidifying the oceans, which prevented anything like that needs shells for making those shells in a lot of places. It's hell. It's insane. It's the worst time in a like broad time period span to be alive on the planet. As James said, not the KPG. That was just a really bad day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and like it's almost like when we think of the KPG extinction event, it's like if suddenly the world entered like a nuclear war and you had like all these nukes going off all over the world. That's somewhat similar to what the KPG is like. But with the end Permian, it's like Earth is becoming a different planet. Like it's there. Mm-hmm. So much change is happening over such a long period of time, and so much is being killed off. It's almost it is unimaginable and how horrible and disastrous it is.
Yeah. No, it's like it's almost it is unimaginable to a degree. Like, I think all of these things are to some degree. I don't think anybody can imagine, like, intuitively the violence of the KPG impact. Like, we're talking about an object colliding with the Earth at orbital speed and, like, literally punching directly through the Earth's crust and exposing the mantle to the atmosphere. And it promptly incinerating everything within, like, I believe hundreds of miles of the impact site.
Yeah.
Like, instantaneous flashpoint incinerate. Like, I mean, like, we can't conceive of, like, you would need to have seen a nuclear bomb going off to even have some, like, level of that. And the KPG is, like, so much more. Like, I just can't imagine
You
what
mean the
that
end
would
Permian?
feel like. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, end Permian, right.
Yeah.
I'm stuck
Like-
on the KPG. Right, to even imagine, like, the Earth just dying over time.
It's the way whenever I talk about it with people is that, like, I very similarly use the insane but reasonable statistics that are used for, like, the end Permian. No, I'm doing it for the end Cretaceous, where it was just like it's the equivalent of taking, like, the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and multiplying it by 10 billion times or something like that. And it was like, if you recreate it, I need to actually crunch the numbers on this once again, because I remember I did this a while ago. And it was just like, if you recreated all of Manhattan and all of the buildings on it out of TNT and detonated it like 300,000 times, it's like, that's like about what it was like for the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. I'm probably off on my number that I pulled out of my butt there, but it was bad. It was more than one Manhattan's worth of TNT, which is a lot. And that is the second worst mass extinction by double-digit percentages. And it's like,
Right.
oh...
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the one place I'll say KPG kind of wins is probably just the speed of it. Like,
oh yeah,
I mean,
it wins
many of the
over
species
every...
were probably, well, I mean, many of the species were probably extinct within hours, right? Like, I've mentioned it before, but I think my favorite name for any paper that's just, it's a paper dedicated to, like, the exact mechanics of what would have happened after the impact was called Survival in the First Hours of the Cenozoic. And that is just
horrifying.
perfect. Right. But yeah, I mean, it's talking about, like, based on, like, the actual physical calculations, like, you would need to have global wildfires because of the amount of heat generated. But because we don't find any charcoal in the KPG levels or in the KPG layers, that is, we know that the heat level generated by the global wildfires must have actually surpassed firestorm level, because firestorms are so hot that they will reignite all the charcoal. And so, you're essentially burning things into only vapor. Like, and this is happening globally. But I think there's something just so depressing and sad about the prospect of literally millions of years on Earth where the planet is just, life is just effectively suffocating, and every progressive day there's less and less alive.
The oceans were literally actually soup. They were boiling.
Acidic soup.
Right.
It's
an acidic soup. It was the oceans were hot enough to denature proteins. Like, literally actually cooking things.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing that life survived. Yeah. And I think this might also, like, this is kind of me talking out of my ass a little bit here. I'm sorry. But, like, this is something I think we need to think about when we think about the possibility of life on other planets. Like, the common refrain I've always heard is like, well, wouldn't we know about it? Wouldn't they be talking to us? And, like, no, space is vast and it wouldn't necessarily be nearby. I hear a lot of people talk about the kind of terrifying specter of the Great Filter, which might be that any civilization that could industrialize would kill itself before it makes it to spacefaring travel. I think that's, like, interesting, but I also do wonder if perhaps, like, maybe life making it through an event like this on Earth is the exception rather than the rule. And, maybe not all planets that could have life do have life because they go through periods like this that are severe enough that nothing can make it. And, you essentially start again. And maybe in some of these exoplanets, maybe we'll find that life is in its primordial soup stage again, right? Perhaps they even have a fossil record of what came before.
Well, I mean, there was that discovery on Mars like last week.
Oh, right. There might be. What was it again? I didn't actually get to look at the
It was like
specifics of
stains
it.
on a rock, right?
They really look like soft body fossils.
That'd be
They
cool.
really look like soft body fossils. They're going to be
Right.
sent back for analysis, but like
They better. Well, how are they sending them back?
I have no idea.
Are we
back.
sending?
So what's
Send that
actually
Just
really
attaching
crazy?
a rocket to them, and it's going to shoot it right up back to the Johnson Air Base.
What's really crazy is that so you might not know this, but the Curiosity rover used to be a professional pitcher, and so he's got a real killer arm on him, and he's just gonna.
Right. I wonder, is the moon's gravity weak enough that a really good baseball pitcher could throw a rock to Earth?
Physicists in the chat, answer us.
Yeah, physicists. I assume the answer is no. The moon's gravity is probably strong enough to prevent that from happening, but I would really love to. I would like to see the math on this.
Absolutely.
Or maybe not throw a rock to Earth, but throw a rock off of the moon.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't
Come back to the moon. I don't know.
Right.
Like, would a bullet fall on the moon, or would it just keep going?
I mean, it would fall a little bit, but that's right.
Yeah,
That's a good question. I
would the
wonder.
gravity of the moon
Right.
pull
Or
it
are
into
you
the
getting to
moon?
escape velocity?
Or, yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
I would bet a bullet would hit escape velocity for the moon. That's
100%.
That's my gut instinct, not knowing anything about the dynamics of space flight other than what I learned while playing Kerbal Space Program a lot in college.
I have
Send up Jebediah Kerbal up there with a gun.
I have
Oh, Jeb's got a gun.
Kerbal Space Program 2, Jeb's got a gun.
Oh, it really is that damn meme of just like a rocket comes back to space from the moon. These astronauts getting guns. It's like, you're back? Moon's haunted. What? Moon's haunted.
So I have just learned something potentially not like actually troubling in terms of we should be worried about it, but mentally troubling a little bit if it's true. And I'm sure there's much debate in the geology literature that I don't have time to
Mentally
read
troubling, if true.
at this moment. But this can also serve as a little bit of a geology lesson as best as we can give it to our audience. Which is that, so the Siberian traps these volcanoes that are presumed to be the main or one of the main causes of the end Permian extinction are flood basalt volcanoes. So they're not like something like Mount St. Helens or Vesuvius that are like big cones that are erupting very violently. They are these enormous fissures that are pumping out magma onto these basalt fields, and accompanying that magma are volatile gases, greenhouse gases, just all kinds of bad crap coming out of the earth. And I think there is probably still debate, from what I can tell. This is from Wikipedia, so veracity, double check, take this with a grain of salt. But this is not something that I knew beforehand, which is that at least one of the models proposing the source of magma and energy for the Siberian trapped volcanoes is a mantle plume. And so, for those who are unfamiliar, there are several kinds of volcanoes in the world, but they tend to kind of come from one of two sources. Either you have a subduction zone where one tectonic plate is going beneath another, and then as it subducts and gets lower and lower into the mantle, it starts to melt, and then that melted material can come up. So that's why in mountain ranges you'll sometimes have volcanoes, and that's what's creating the Pacific Ring of Fire, if you've heard about that. It's subduction zones around the Pacific Plate that are creating volcanism at the edge of this plate. And that's where a lot of volcanoes come from. But there are also hotspot volcanoes, which come from something called mantle plumes, which is just it's what it sounds like. It's a plume of hot material that's coming up through the mantle to reach the bottom of the crust. And the most famous example of this is Hawaii and the Hawaiian Island chains. And it gives you a good idea of the dynamics of these, because if you look at the Hawaiian Island chains, I'm trying to see how my finger is going to track in the camera, but the Hawaiian Island chains They're, the largest island is the newest, and then they get progressively smaller as they get older. And they are continuous with the Emperor Seamounts, which are now submerged, but at one point would have been above the water. And the hot spot has not moved from its location in the mantle, but the crust above it is moving over this hot spot. And so the volcano is moving, essentially. And as it moves, new islands are created. That's the most famous example of a hot spot. But it seems that the Siberian traps may have also been caused by a hot spot, presumably a much larger mantle plume than the one that was in Hawaii, that is linked to other flood basalts that are to, I believe, to the east of the Siberian traps, which is another flood basalt layer that is apparently coincident with the late Devonian extinction, which I did not know about. I knew about the extinction, but not about this flood basalt. And then, which may also still be relict in a hotspot that is driving the volcanism under Iceland. And it may have just kind of progressed under all of Europe. And so the magma plume, the mantle plume that killed everything might still be around today, but now it's just driving tourism in a really pretty spot.
So on just really quickly on the whole thing of the flood basalts and like this being a relatively, like, as James kind of like hinted towards, I guess a gentle eruption.
That was Dalton.
I guess, yeah. As I've definitely heard the opposite. That, like, I have heard that one of, and this could be like, we could just cut this because one of us might be just absolutely wrong on this. But I've heard that there is evidence that the Siberian traps was kind of kicked off when one of these magma plumes encountered a gigantic coal seam that was in the Tunguska Basin that was like roughly the size of the continental US and 12 kilometers thick. And when that magma reached it, it just blew up Russia.
I have never heard this.
I have not heard
Really?
this.
Okay, so I'm going to have to look into this.
Because that's not how magma works.
Yeah, so I have heard, Scott, that one potential reason why this flood basalt event may have been exacerbatedly, like, made worse than other flood basalt eruptions in Earth history is that the magma did reach a coal seam, and that just released a bunch more CO2 than would have been expected from an eruption this size. Like, it burnt up that material. But I have not heard that resulted in any kind of, like, explosion. Because all of the magma is laid out in these huge basalt fields, which is where the word trap comes from, because it's describing, like, a stair step of just all of these, like, progressive layers of basalt that kind of form, like, a step topography.
Huh.
Which wouldn't, at least to me, speak of a violent...
Yeah. Well, yeah, because, like, the violent eruptions are caused, like, broadly speaking, when you have, like, a cap on the like, when the pressure within the magma chamber is building and building and building and building and building, and that causes, like, extreme violent eruption when finally the pressure reaches the threshold where it can rupture the surrounding rock. I don't think hitting a lot of ignitable material would then lead to an increase in pressure, because it would presumably do the opposite, right? If it can burn up, you're going to be, like, actually alleviating the overlying pressure of the rock quite a bit. So you wouldn't have, like, I would be surprised if it would have blown up Russia, but I've never heard about this, but it makes sense to me that perhaps this particular flood basalt gets so bad because it also ignites an entire United States worth of CO2 immediately.
Yeah. I don't want to, like, characterize it as, like, completely non-violent, and it's probably also not completely uniform. There very well could be more explosive and less explosive parts, because no one's ever seen an event like this in recorded human history.
Good.
And it's good that we have it.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to.
I doubt it was, like, perfectly uniform. But
right. That would be like being that guy who realized he was going to die while videotaping Mount St. Helens erupt, but instead of realizing you in specific are going to die, oh no,
everything's going to die.
You and the rest of the world.
It's like If you
everyone
want
is
to
going to die.
if you want to see like those feelings in a small scale, hey, read the comments under the video of that geyser in Yellowstone that exploded like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, also, I wanted to bring up Yellowstone. I'm sorry. Like, Yellowstone's another famous hotspot volcano.
Yes.
It's not currently active, and it's certainly not a flood basalt.
Better not be.
I would like it to keep not being that.
No, it's a different kind of horrible semi-apocalyptic volcano.
Right.
On a shorter time scale.
Right. It's on the shorter time scale, but Yellowstone's another one. Like, it exists in the middle of the continent. It's not linked to a mountain range or a subduction zone or something where you've got a lot of volcanoes, because it's a mantle plume.
Yeah. And you can track previous eruptions of that volcano as it's moving westward or eastward, excuse me.
It's coming for New England.
It's coming for New England slowly. It's moving eastward, and you can track prior eruptions in Idaho, and I think even up into Washington as well, that are from the same mantle.
Right. And I don't believe we know. This would be a good question. We should have our friend Chris on here to talk about mantle dynamics at some point, because he knows them quite a lot, or quite a bit, I should say. But I don't believe the mechanisms for hotspot formation are really known, or for why they wind up dying.
I think that is a mystery, as far as my knowledge of it goes.
Just sometimes the Earth says this one region in particular.
I sentence ye to non-existence.
Yes. I want to. I think we've talked about this for a good amount of time, but I want to briefly say, I think because maybe of our growing recognition of what happened at the Permian mass extinction, there is also this competing theory about what happened at the KPG mass extinction, that it was a similar event. Because instead of northern Asia causing the extinction of all life on Earth, a smaller group of researchers contends that southern Asia decided to end life on Earth at the end of the Cretaceous and through the Deccan traps in India. And while there certainly were flood basalts going on at the time, they don't seem to have caused that mass extinction in particular.
Maybe if the asteroid hadn't hit, they would have caused a slightly better. I don't know. Maybe they would have done a mass extinction of a different magnitude. Who knows in what direction?
Here's something that here's what I like very much. So the Deccan traps had started in the late Cretaceous, and don't really seem to be having that much of an impact on the dinosaur fauna. It's possible that some of the weirdness we see start to happen in the Maastrichtian is linked to environmental change from all of that. Like, the Maastrichtian does seem to be a little more depauperate in terms of species than the Campanian is. Just deposits don't turn up as much. I don't think that we can safely say that's a real signal, because there could be a lot else going on. But yeah, it's possible that Earth's under a little bit of stress at that point. And so there's a generally lower diversity. It's possible. It's one interpretation. But I remember reading or looking into something. So we've been able to very precisely date the episodes of Deccan trap volcanism. Mm-hmm. We can radiometrically date volcanic rock. So having a lot of it, we can actually date it, and we know there are pulses of eruption, right? It's not all happening continuously. It's not like the camera cuts over to India. It's like, well, let's see what's happening in India, and it's just a continuous Hawaii level explosion constantly.
It's just hell.
There are episodes of quiescence. It's just hell, right? They're like, let's not go to India.
Meanwhile, back in India, just hell.
But there are moments where it's more violent and moments where it's less violent. One of these pulses of the eruption has, every time we date it, winds up more and more firmly exactly coincident with the KPG impact. And I remember looking at one point, and I'm going to confirm this now. Well, actually, it's hard to confirm, and I could be wrong on this, but based on my general interpretation, if you make a map of the antipode of... am I not allowed to see this map? Oh, never mind. I'm not allowed to. I'll try to generate it later. Currently, the map is down. The antipode on the globe is the position on the Earth directly opposite something. And I'm sure some of you may have seen visualizations of this because, like, a common saying, Hattie, I have no idea if you say something similar where you grew up, but like a common saying in the US is that if you dig a deep hole, you're trying to dig to China. Because like the perception is that it's on the opposite side of the world.
Yeah, I've heard of like that.
Does
saying.
that expression exist for you?
Yeah, no, so a part of my growing up was in the UK, so I've heard of it. But from the other part of my growing up, no, I don't think there's anything that similar to it.
Okay. So maybe it's a US only thing, but China is not directly opposite any part of the US on the globe. Like in most parts of the globe, like your antipode is somewhere in the ocean. And I remember looking, and the current position of the Chicxulub impact crater appears to be at the antipode of the deccan of what was the Deccan
it's
trap
like where
volcanism
India
in
was
India.
in the Mesozoic. I just checked,
Right.
and it's like northeast of Madagascar.
Right. And I mean, like, there's got like, what if that pulse of volcanism was just set off because the Earth got hit really hard?
It's the exit wound.
You know, I don't know if that were. It's the exit wound. Yeah, I mean, it's cool, and I don't think that would actually have a lot of bearing because it's not like the Deccan traps wasn't already happening, right? It's not like that would have started the entire process, but it would be funny if one pulse of volcanism was because the Earth got hit by the asteroid, and you know, whatever that does to the mantle, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But anyway, to make a long story very short, the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs does appear to precisely date to the impact event, and we don't have a clear answer on whether dinosaurs were declining in response to Deccan trap volcanism. And so I think it is possible, but not proven, that dinosaurs were experiencing some stress from the volcanism, but the extinction was almost certainly just a response to the asteroid.
I'm just go on.
James, it's funny that you mentioned that because it has been invoked for the Permian mass extinction that an antipodal impact in Antarctica that seems to roughly coincide with it, with the Siberian trap volcanism, may have triggered the Siberian traps to erupt. Now, I don't know how. That's from 2009, I think.
Okay.
So, well, actually, let me double check if this paper even says this. That's another thing that's on Wikipedia. So, again, grain of salt it. But I think people have entertained the idea that impacts may... No, it's in the paper, yeah, that the impact may have helped at least to somewhat trigger the volcanism in Siberia.
That's so cool.
If Earth gets
that's
hit
like
on
the
one
worst
side,
combination of,
and it will always erupt on the
right,
other.
And it just so happens that on the other side, there's not only a mantle plume waiting to cause problems, but a gigantic coal seam that'll belch like multiple industrial revolutions worth of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere instantaneously.
I just had the image in my head of because James, you said that there's a chance that this caused the Deccan traps caused quite a bit of stress to like the dinosaurs that were existent at the time. I just went back to our bit of cutting to it's like meanwhile back in India, and it's just hell. It's like just small font. This caused stress to the local dinosaurs.
Very stressed.
all those dinosaurs in India were just saying like, man, I'm very stressed right now.
It's just like they're just a little uncomfy, not taking that much like the same level of like solace in their hobbies and stuff like that. And it's like, hey man, you doing okay? It's like, I don't know, I'm just like really stressed. Oh, is it everything on fire and being under lava? That's not helping.
Yeah, is it the fact that our subcontinent is entirely on fire right now? And I'm sorry, we have to talk about one more episode of flood basalt deposition. The breakup of Pangaea appears to be associated with this as well, and this is like not the same kind of mantle plume thing, presumably because it's a new plate boundary forming as Pangaea is ripping apart.
Good lord!
But there are flood basalts all over the northeastern United States,
and you can see them easily.
You can see them all the time. If you've ever been in New York City, the Palisades on the other side of the Hudson River are a gigantic flood basalt outcropping. That's actually directly continuous geologically, or it's like part of the same flood basalt formation as the hills around the town of Gettysburg that were later used by Union troops to issue the Confederacy's first enormous irrecoverable L. Which, yeah, thank God. Thank God for those flood basalts indirectly ending slavery in the United States.
You heard it. You heard it here first, everybody.
Right.
The concept of plate tectonics in and of itself is against the Confederacy.
Some dinosaur's entire family was incinerated by a lava flow, and another dinosaur came over and patted him on the shoulder and said, "It's okay. This will all be worth it sometime."
Some racists are going to die real bad because of this.
Yeah. So, some poor Confederate soldier who was like 16 and conscripted is being blown apart by canister shot, and he has that Assassin's Creed like dying moment where he sees the family of the dinosaur. The dinosaur's like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I lost something too, you know." Anyway,
that's so funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of good happening here. But yeah, so this flood basalt, like this volcanism, is probably also associated with the Triassic-Jurassic extinction.
It's bad when it happens.
I can't emphasize this is a bad thing to have happen to the Earth. If this starts happening, we are not going to have a good time.
Just the parentheses. This kills the biosphere.
Yes. Yeah, and the mechanics of the Triassic-Jurassic extinction are not fully understood, because that seems to really be the extinction event. Like, dicynodonts are around by the end of the Triassic, or do they go extinct before that?
No, so the biggest dicynodont, the Lysovisia from Poland, is known from the Ratian, so that's the very last part of the Triassic.
Okay, so they are around, and like that. I mean, to bring this back to the animal we're talking about here.
Well done, that was a good.
Which I know. So like that Triassic-Jurassic impact extinction event is really, I think, what you could attribute as creating the modern biosphere. Like by the end of the Triassic, I feel like the Earth's recognizable, and with the major exception of non-avian dinosaurs no longer existing, like functionally, you've got the same kinds of groups of animals, and the world starts being a lot more recognizable than I would say it was in the Triassic. Like Triassic's a very weird time from a modern perspective. You know, we've got a lot of things with sailbacks, and you've got bipedal crocodilians and all of that. I mean, this is generally what's remarked upon as the assembly of a modern terrestrial fauna, right?
Yeah, if I could just segue back into...
And I think yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's just something that came to mind about survivorship across the end Permian mass extinction. So, of course, we mentioned about how disastrous and how much of a calamity the end Permian was. But there actually are multiple lineages of dicynodonts that make it across the boundary. It's quite fascinating. So in Lystrosaurus itself, we have at least 2 species are making it across the boundary, and possibly up to 5 that are surviving, 5 or 6 even. And then there are other non-Lystrosaurus dicynodonts that are making it across this mass extinction as well. So there's this one very small taxon called Myosaurus, which is related to many, many other small ones, some of which are hyper-specialized burrowers. And Myosaurus, despite all its relatives being from the Permian, is from the Triassic. And then again, closely related to Lystrosaurus, there are 3 of these dicynodontoid dicynodonts, which Lystrosaurus is one, these close relatives of it, 3 of which might have actually been from the Triassic instead of the Permian. So they also might have made it across this mass extinction event. And then there's the big Triassic radiation, the Canamea which might have popped up originally in the Permian. So despite how absolutely horrible this extinction event was, it's possible we had different lineages actually surviving, possibly for the same reasons, like they had similar adaptations that helped them make it across this boundary.
That's really interesting. I mean, something kind of similar also happens to mammals at the KPG, right? Because you do get multituberculates, which are now extinct, making it across with placental mammals. And not only placentals, obviously. I feel very bad for multituberculates going extinct in the Eocene.
That's rough.
Which is the best time to be alive. It's like the Earth is at perfect, warm, lush conditions. And they're like, well, we made it through the worst couple days that Earth's ever had, but we're going to go now. Yeah.
This resource is kind of like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Yeah. It's. I think that we've made jokes before of there's just it's oh man, the world isn't dying and on fire and everything's awful and hell. My work here is done. I simply cannot vibe under these conditions.
Right.
I don't think
they dissolve into gold dust like Odin does in that Thor movie.
They enter Lystrosaurus sleep.
They will be back.
I also
Exactly. Yeah. They'll return when the Earth's biosphere is threatened again.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, it's like it's some very put upon reporter who's like, breaking news: human-caused climate change has gotten so bad that Lystrosaurus has returned.
It's King Arthur.
It's the Ant-Man meme. Lystrosaurus, I need you to distract climate change.
So I'm sorry, Scott. Did you have a question? Because I have a question about Lystrosaurus.
I have a statement about Lystrosaurus, and then I have a comment about Lystrosaurus.
Statement first, then comment, then question.
Statement and a question. I hate words. I have, well, my statement is I think that we should draw at least a little bit of attention to the fact that the document that Hady, that you put together for us on Lystrosaurus has a phenomenal title, which is
Yes.
Panic at the Lystro.
Yes. I was going to comment on that initially because I just went back to reference it to check something before I asked a question. And I was like, I forgot to mention that this is brilliantly titled.
It's so good.
Yeah. Actually, can we use that as the title?
I was about to ask.
Oh yeah.
Perhaps. Okay, good.
Yes. So my question was about the whole like survivorship thing across into the Triassic. Does it still hold water, that whole thing that gets that statistic that gets bandied around every once in a while of that during the end Permian 75% of the vertebrate fossils found are Lystrosaurus?
No, in some localities it's more. So it's like up to 90%, if not slightly more. Like it's basically all you're finding, and it's a lot. Like I think there are some places in South Africa where, like, if you will find a Lystrosaurus specimen of some sort every time you go, or almost every time you go. Like it's so common. These animals just fossilize really, really well, and they must have been very abundant as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that that's not exactly what, like, in the recent documentary Life on Our Planet, they slightly misinterpreted that statistic and said that 75% of all life on Earth was Lystrosaurus, which is not the case.
It's not the bacteria, it's the Lystrosaurus.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All vertebrates.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think it was all like 75% of
life, don't they?
If they do, that's hilarious. It was like my gut microbiome is made out of single cellular Lystrosaurus.
It's only Lystro.
Lystro all the way down.
So, like, do we have any like kind of hypotheses about why they do go extinct once they make it through this period? And was it that they all got eaten by a single Erythrosuchus?
I don't know if it's possible there could have been an Erythrosuchus that hungry, because that's so much to eat. And so I think that generally the idea is that the Canameri forms, the Triassic radiation, are replacing them. So I think that's like historically what's been proposed. It might also be linked to like climate change. Although I'm not, I want to say I'm not 100% sure, but it does seem to be the case that as Lystrosaurus disappears, by like the time we get to the Middle Triassic, vertebrate assemblages, terrestrial vertebrate assemblages, are dominated by these Canameri-formed Triassic dicynodonts. Like you get all sorts of species living in the same place in various different continents.
Huh. That's interesting. So, and Canameriforms are probably also making it through the boundary?
Yeah. Although we have like no definite fossils, even from the early Triassic. Although there might be like one weird fossil that could be a Canameriform, but generally there's nothing like definitely we can say there's even from the early Triassic, despite them popping up possibly in the Permian.
Okay. And I guess, like, I mean, maybe we don't know this, but maybe we do. Is there any obvious advantage that Canameriforms would have over Lystrosaurus in terms of like do they seem to have greater mechanical performance of their skulls or something like that we could, like, is there any specific trait we've pointed to as this might have allowed them to outcompete them, or is it just like they seem to outcompete them because one goes away and the other continues being successful?
I think it might be related to larger external nares, but I don't know if that's how widespread and common like that general variation in nares morphology is the case in all the Triassic dicynodonts. So I don't know if that's really separating the caniforms from Lystrosaurus. But, I mean, besides that, of course, the caniforms are a lot more diverse than just the genus Lystrosaurus. And they don't have downturned snouts, so it might be related to them being able to eat different things because of different snout morphology, and that might be, possibly, is the case. Which I think also is a nice thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
with Lystrosaurus, is that...
Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
I think a cool similarity between it and like T-Rex or Triceratops is that despite it being like the most popular like genus or taxon within its wider group, so in the case like Lystrosaurus as a dicynodont, or T-Rex as a tyrannosaur, or Triceratops as a ceratopsian, that each of these three are actually really, really weird compared to like the rest of the stuff in the group. The T-Rex is like such an... It's so much of a predator. It's so big and robust. And Triceratops is like weird. It has like filled in frills and stuff. And then Lystrosaurus has a very, very weird downturned snout, which we don't see to this extent in any other dicynodont. And I think it's just pretty cool how like these like exemplar taxa in each of these big groups, the popular ones, are actually really weird relative to everything else in the group.
That's really cool.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah. And I guess like a final question, because I just want to try to give you an opportunity to plug your recent paper. How does Lystrosaurus compare to Gordonia?
Well, the most notable difference is that big downturned snout that we see in Lystrosaurus, which is not the case in many dicynodonts, including Gordonia. But Gordonia, we also know, has a very weird ridge on its lower jaw that seems to anchor like the big jaw closing muscles differently than in other dicynodonts. It seems to come down, like they must have come down at like more of an angle rather than a more like, I guess, vertical way. And of course, one major difference between Lystrosaurus and Gordonia specifically is related to what's going on at the top of the head. Lystrosaurus has a very flat and wide, like, intertemporal region, so like that part of the head between the two big holes, it's very wide and it's very flat. Whereas in Gordonia, it's the opposite. It's very narrow and it's a crest that anchors these weird muscles, or these strong muscles, I should say. That's probably the biggest difference that is noticeable between the two skulls. But post-cranially, I don't think there is as much difference as there is in the cranium between the two.
Okay. And Gordonia, correct me if I'm wrong, it's preserved as like a negative space, right?
Yeah.
Or this fossil you worked on?
It's super weird.
That's
the stuff
so
that you get.
cool.
Yeah. This is like what we see generally to be the case in these Elgin reptiles. So Elgin is a place in the north of Scotland where you get a lot of Permian, like end-to-end Permian stuff like Gordonia, but also some Triassic stuff like Scleromoculus, for example. And they're really weird fossils in that you get like a void in the rock that represents the bone. So in the case of in the specimen I worked on in my master's,
molds.
Yeah, they are natural molds. So in the case of the Gordonia I worked on in my master's, that's published in the paper, it's just a block of sandstone with a hole inside of it. And that block was scanned, and then I worked on processing the CT data of that block, which was the skull. And even like I think one cool, like another thing that's flipped in this case is that we often think of the endocast as the hole in the head. So you have like a fossil skull, and inside the fossil skull where the brain should be, there's a big cavity, and it's an empty space where the brain sits. But in this weird fossil, it's the opposite. So you have the empty space is the skull, and the endocast is like sandstone where the cavity is. And that's such a weird thing that we're so lucky to have. Like, it's such a bizarre fossil of a very cool animal, I'd say. It's one of the only dicynodonts from Western Europe.
That's so weird.
How was it recognized that there was a skull in that block?
But it's an active quarry zone where it's from. And one of the quarry workers noticed it, and he's like, this is weird. Like, there's nothing else here that looks like this really weird hole. It almost has like a triplanar morphology to it, like just the hole in the rock. And so they got like a stick or like a cable or something they just were poking inside. This is in the late 90s. And they were just really, they had no idea what it was. And then they asked like a local expert, Carol Hopkins, who came and visited the quarry, and they had found fossils like this in the past from very nearby quarries. Like in the past, I mean like over 100 years beforehand. And she thought this could be a fossil. So then this block of sandstone was broken out of the quarry and was taken to, I think in Glasgow, where it was scanned. Like one of the first like CT and even MRI studies of a fossil were done on this very weird block of sandstone. And from there they figured out, oh, it's a dicynodont. It's a very weird dicynodont that looks like the other dicynodonts from the other quarry that's also very close to where this quarry is. And and that 20 years later, we then scanned it again, and I worked on it. So we got to see like a lot of similar morphology, but we also got to see things in a lot more high detail because we were able to micro CT scan.
Wow.
That's insane. I love this. That's so cool. Do we know why the body fossils are preserving as voids?
I'm not 100% sure there is like anything in the literature that confidently says why. I can't tell you for sure exactly why. I think it's just related to they are fossilizing, or sorry, the matrix is like sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Is taking the shape of the skull, like on the margins of the skull, quicker than the fossil or the skull itself is like decaying away. So you have like that shape preserved before like the actual anatomy is lost. But I can't really tell you much more detail than that, although that is like quite obvious from the fossil itself. And you get weird like chemical composition as well. Like you get certain metals like cobalt, for example, where you get this type of preservation in these Elgin quarries in the molds themselves. So it might be linked to like certain metals are allowing this to happen and things like that. I'm not really sure exactly what the details are.
Huh.
Cool.
Yeah. And so one thing I should also talk about how Gordonia is related to Lystrosaurus is that Lystrosaurus is a Lystrosaurid. It's probably, besides one other genus, the only thing we can definitely say is a Lystrosaurus. So there's also like a Eutykignathus, which has a slightly downturned snout as well, much more so than any other dicynodont, with the exception of Lystrosaurus. So we can say that one is like almost definitely a Lystrosaurid. There's this thing called Quezulusaurus, which I think its real taxonomy is a bit contentious at the moment. It might just be one of the already established species of Lystrosaurus. And so what else is in Lystrosauridae, the family of this animal? Lystrosauridae is formally defined by everything that's more closely related to Lystrosaurus than to Dicynodon or Canimeiria. So it just kind of depends what your phylogeny ends up finding. So in my study, we found that there were a bunch of things that are more closely related to Lystrosaurus than those other two, indicating it was quite an inclusive group. And this group even includes the Scottish Gordonia. However, it's very weakly supported in our recovered topology or cladogram. So it's really hard to say what exactly is and isn't a Lystrosaurus at the moment, but it's at least including like these two taxa, Lystrosaurus itself, of course, and Eutykignathus.
Now just having thoughts about all these other areas where fossils aren't common, because one thing I've heard of is like geochemical conditions would cause bone to dissolve. But if the rock's already lithified by the time that happens, I wonder if we're missing a lot that has actually been like found and we're just mistaking them for breaks in the bone, or breaks in the rock rather.
Do you not get something similar in the Gobi?
Me. A void spaces like this, not at least in the Gobi material I've worked on. There have been I think there are a few cases of very weird things like that where you get like a natural mold preserved, but usually what you're seeing there is like it seems to actually be a mold of like the brain itself that exists as a physical structure. Nothing where we're pulling out rocks and like the void space is actually corresponding to the bones. Again, in the material I've worked on at the very least. But yeah, there's a few Gobi dinosaurs with with preserved brain endocasts that are sediment, which is neat.
No, that's not preserved. That's what they were like.
Yeah,
head full of sand.
Would Lystrosaurus interact with an Oviraptorosaur?
It won't.
Oh, no.
I've tried. in like I was really hoping it doesn't fight with anything.
Oh, really?
No, wait, it doesn't fight with anything. Some smaller carnivores can eat it. Like if you wanted to be at least a little bit like, I mean, I know that there weren't dinosaurs around at the time, but like Herrerasaurus will eat it. And it's very sad. Because it's such a cute little thing.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna maybe like the last thing I wanted to talk about was like how plausible is it a Lystrosaurus being able to decapitate an Oviraptorosaur? Because that's the best part of the movie, and it's not even in the movie.
That's right.
I know, it's so sad. I think it's pretty. I think it could happen. Oviraptorosaurs have pretty hollow neck vertebrae, and it looks like these animals had a nasty bite.
Yeah, I mean Lystrosaurus especially compared
Just
to
very, very
sad.
powerful jaw muscles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, that thing would have been like a guillotine for big dinosaur chicken
fingers.
For fingers.
Valid to eat fingers.
Yeah, do not stick your fingers into its mouth.
Yeah, I imagine I would not be surprised if a fight between an Oviraptor and one of these guys went the way that it does in that movie.
Yeah, especially one of the size of a little Oviraptor.
Yes. Like, yeah, if it was Pseudopody or something, then like that's a different story. But
if it was a Gigantoraptor.
Right. Yeah, and then it picks it up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you would need to create in the Proceratosaurus video, I made a joke about a Proceratosaurus Voltron to take down Brachiosauruses. This video is not released yet when we're recording this, but I could imagine a Lystrosaurus Voltron coming together to make one giant Lystrosaurus that could bite off the Gigantoraptor's head.
No, that's why the giant Lyswaya or whatever it is, the giant Lysovisia, that's what it is. That's what they were doing. They were trying to get big before they knew that. Like we always say, that evolution doesn't plan ahead. This time it did. They were trying to get Dicynodonts were trying to get as big as possible because they knew Oviraptors were coming, and so they were just trying to get huge so they could take them down. Anyways, should we take this to the species viewer and rank this pig man?
I think we ought to.
I think we should. So Amelia already sent in her ranking, and Amelia has ranked Lystrosaurus A for abhorrent.
Its feelings have been hurt.
That hurts my feelings too. My feeling is that this is an H tier design. It's a beautiful little guy. It's so silly looking. I just love this in a game with giant theropod dinosaurs and sauropods that we also get this little pig reptile just like kind of doing that through the environment. I also think they qualify for hero tier because they persisted through the most challenging time to be alive on Earth for millions of years and then, assisted in the repopulation and kind of diversification of life afterward. And that's a cool thing. This guy's tough. Right? This is like an old guy who used to, work in a really, really tough industry. He was like an assassin or something. And now he's like cute. It's like that. There's a comedy routine I've seen on like my social media reels. I forget who the comic is, but she's talking about like how especially white people often have really silly names for their grandpa. It's like, this is Peepaw. And then like Peepaw was in Korea. Peepaw has killed 20 people. And it's always like, oh, Peepaw always falls asleep at the family functions. Oh, isn't he so cute? This is how I feel about Lystrosaurus. Lystrosaurus is Peepaw, and I love Peepaw. Lystrosaurus has 20 confirmed kills, and they're all Oviraptors. They're decapitated.
See, they need to release a skin for it that just has him painted on the side like an ace in World War II.
Yeah, it's got decals. They're all just Oviraptor skulls going down the flanks. I love it. H tier design. The only real like criticism that I would have of it, like aesthetically, but I don't even dislike it, are like, the little bit of a frill at the back of the skull, which is just kind of wrong.
I hate that. Yeah.
And like the very sunken temporal fenestra and cavities in the skull, because like that should be full of their big muscle. But it's also clear that they were referencing a Lystrosaurus skull to some degree while they were making the design. Like you're seeing architecture under there. This isn't them like misinterpreting or just kind of going crazy on their own. They're clearly referencing and trying to faithfully depict the animal. And I like that. So this is an H tier for me. Peepaw gets H tier even if he falls asleep after dinner on Thanksgiving.
I love this thing so much. It's so cute. I love the way it runs. Its social animation's adorable. I have to say, I really like a lot of the animations around it. I like a lot of its behaviors. I like the body way more than the head on this guy. That, like, as James mentioned, like the sunken fenestrae and the frill. Like, if they just fixed those couple things, I'd be very comfortable just saying it was just like, oh, it's wonderful. But yeah, it's like I have quibbles with it, but it brings me joy, and I'm gonna give the Meat Spud an H. I love him.
Meat Spud.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add that hasn't already been said. I have the same problems with it, but I love it so much that Peepaw gets H tier from me. This is like if we want to really talk Alex's very stringent cute little guy definition for H tier. I don't know many cuter little guys in the game.
True.
Yeah, Peepaw gets H tier, and I think H tier in this case could also be said to stand for Hady tier, because Hady did an H tier job.
There we go.
Yes. Helping us get through the video on Lystrosaurus. I think personally this has been one of my favorite recording sessions in recent memory. And this has been
a blast.
This has been fantastic. And so I want to take this moment to thank you for joining us today, for talking about Lystrosaurus with us. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming here and for being part of this video.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it as well.
How would you rank it, even if we don't end up factoring it into the tabulation?
Can you zoom in on the skull just to have a closer look?
It's about as close as I can get.
It is definitely a small, cute little guy. So I think like the anatomical inaccuracies, I don't really mind them. Like it's still quite clearly Lystrosaurus, and it just looks so absent-minded. Like I can imagine this thing at the end permanent mass extinction, where everything else is just dying around it, and it's just munching on like a root in a burrow, and there's like a million of them, and there's like nothing else. And it's quite a nice design. If I had to choose, it might be like high A or low H. But it's not that cute. It's not like compared to some of the other stuff in H tier.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean,
it's fair.
Like Homalocephalae, perhaps the cutest thing in the game.
True.
I don't know.
And Shonisaurus is, of course, the ultimate cute little guy.
Indeed.
The Shonisaurus, perhaps one of the largest vertebrates to ever evolve.
Alrighty. Well, with that...
What have we done? We've created a terrible gridlock.
What do you mean?
Of what the final rank is.
Because what is Scott's rank?
We have 3 H's and 2 A's.
So one H and A will average to an S. Then one H and A will average to an S. So it's 2 S's and an H. I would argue this makes it either the highest of S tier,
or the lowest of H tier,
or the lowest of H tier. Let's allow. Hady, how would you tie break?
You're the tiebreaker. Yes.
So so we could mathematically go up into H or down into S. Where do you decree it goes as the expert?
I feel like S tier is like for like really, really nice S tier designs. And I think it suits H more as it's one of like the small, cute and cuddly things. Maybe not cuddly, but small and cute. So I'd go H.
So, heard it here from the expert. Lystrosaurus gets bumped up into H tier. Hooray! There was much rejoicing.
Oh, indeed.
And that means it's time to spin the wheel, doesn't it?
It is indeed time to... Oh, wait.
Oh,
it's the Triassic now. Lystrosaurus is gone.
Oh, no. Replace it with Kanamairi.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. Now it is time to
spin
that
wheel.
Are we staying with a little guy?
No,
Are we
we're going
going
big, we're
over
going
to
big.
the... All right.
Metrocanthosaurus.
Not
Oh,
so
I've
big.
been waiting to do this one for a long time.
I'm so excited about
Me
this.
too.
I love Metrocanthosaurus. Another
One of the
I
sleeper.
was going to say another
coolest.
British dinosaur, but the Lystrosaurus is not British, nor is it a dinosaur. So
Another
never mind.
British dinosaur.
Oh, compared to Proceratosaurus, is that what you were thinking?
I think so, yeah, because I was
Yeah.
just editing that video. But anyway,
One of the sleeper best designs in the game.
Yeah.
yeah, Metrocanthosaurus is great. We're going to talk about it in our next video. And now we're going to just take this brief moment to thank the patrons of the Skeleton Crew who do so much to make this channel possible. It's not easy for us to be full-time scientists and paleontologists and content creators. This takes a lot of time out of our schedule. It's something that we do because we think it's important, right? Science communication is all too often not brought to the public directly by scientists, and I think there's a really good place for educators and professional science communicators to to kind of communicate to diverse audiences and broader groups of people. But I think it's something that scientists also need to try to do themselves, right? It's something that's important for us to be a part of, and we try to be part of that process through what we do here. All of the support that you guys give us as viewers of the Skeleton Crew goes a really long way to ensuring that we can keep doing this, and so we thank all of you profusely. If you join our Patreon, you'll have the opportunity to talk, or if you join our Patreon, you have the opportunity to join our Discord server for Skeleton Crew patrons. You'll be able to vote in polls, access some exclusive content like bloopers and cut segments. There's one really great one coming that is relevant to a carbonated water bit that we had to cut all probably cumulatively 45 minutes of.
It wasn't 45 minutes. It was closer to 20 to 30.
That's still
Okay.
Only 30
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, you get your name in the credits of our video, which are scrolling now. In addition to the kind of visual credits, we give a special verbal shout out to all of our patrons at Gorgosaurus tier and higher. That's $25 a month or more on Patreon. And so at this moment, I would like to thank Benjamin Siepser, nickname Philip Fico, Christopher Bellis Jones, Aaron Anderson, Adamolos, Blacklight Virus, Camphibia, Dan O'Kyrus, Dynodom, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, original username Pythonic, Ryan Wants to Die, Swamp Ape Science, Wanderer, and Wheat. So thank you guys so much for your support of the Skeleton Crew. We really simply could not do this without you. And tune in next week when, unfortunately, Hady will no longer be with us. And so more on that in a moment. But the rest of the crew is presumably still with us when we talk about
Indeed.
Metrocanthosaurus. Before we go, I also want anybody who really appreciated Hady joining here, who enjoyed having the guest on the channel, please show your thanks in the comments, right? It was,
And where can they
we've been
find you?
scheduling this for a while. Yeah, and where can they find you? Do you have social media presence you'd like to plug, or
Yeah.
do you not want them finding you?
No, I do use
Give them your
Twitter,
home
so, yeah.
address. No.
No,
Yeah.
not my home address, please.
So yeah, you can find Hady on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, no home address. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Also, check out, if you're interested, check out his paper on Gordonia. It is really, really cool science and, a wonderful anatomical description. We're excited to see the stuff you make. And hopefully we can have you back on the channel at some point soon to talk about your research as it comes out.
Yeah, there is more
So,
Dicynodont stuff
Thank
coming.
you for joining. This has been fantastic.
awesome.
There is.
Let's
Oh, great.
go.
We'll have to rank Lystrosaurus again to talk about more. No, we could just do a feature on your papers. But seriously, that's fantastic. I'm really excited to see all of it.
Thank you so much.
Just can't wait. So thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thank you.
joining. Yeah, it's been great having you here. And until next time, this will be the Skeleton Crew signing off.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.